Thanks for having me. I'm Dr. Dale Shaffer-Morrison. I'm a lecturer at the University of Essex, which is in the UK. I'd like to talk to you today about future time perspective. I would define future time perspective as the tendency to both think about and plan for the future. And interestingly, you can be high on both a future time perspective and also a present time perspective, so they're not mutually exclusive. I got interested in studying future time perspective because I study conservation norms, which is the tendency to care about nature or the natural world and feel like you have a personal responsibility to do something about it. And there's not a lot of research on how those conservation norms actually develop, so I started looking at future time perspective as a sort of precursor to the development of those norms. Sure, so future time perspective is typically studied either by asking people what their tendency to think about the future is in general, using a scale. One of the ones that we have used is the Zimbardo Future Time Perspective Scale. So that's questions like, I tend to plan my days out, and also a feeling like you have agency or control over your future outcomes. Another typical way to be studying future time perspective is through an experiment where you ask people to explicitly think about the future in some way. People do tend to vary greatly in their future time perspective. Some people tend to really think about and plan for the future a lot, even thinking about their own retirement, for example, from a very young age. But other people, not so much. They tend to more live in the moment, for example, or they just don't think they need to think about the future. And it tends to be that if a person feels like they have control over their future outcomes, then they're going to be thinking about the future more because they think it's valuable to do so.
Are you one type or the other, would you say?
I think I'm really high on future time perspective, yes. Yeah, so within the realm of goal-directed activity, it tends to be that people high on future time perspective have better outcomes in life in general. So that's things like career achievement, higher GPAs, and in general, reaching the goals that you want to reach. And there's been a number of studies looking at goal-directed behavior, which show that people who tend to think about the future are better on what's called goal monitoring, or seeing what their progress is towards their goal, and then being able to adjust their plan to get themselves back on track.
Have there been any interesting findings with the future time perspective in conservation?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the realm of conservation psychology or environmental psychology, it's been found that people who tend to have a future time perspective do less of what's called delayed discounting when they think about climate change. Delayed discounting is the tendency to downplay both the costs of a future consequence and also downplay the benefits of acting to avoid those consequences. Or to maximize gains. So it tends to be that people who think more about the future have a higher risk perception when it comes to climate change, and also a greater personal responsibility to do something about it. And future time perspective also correlates with more actual pro-environmental behavior. It's difficult to induce people to think about the future habitually. So future time perspective is thought to be a way of thinking about the world that forms starting with childhood, essentially. And the way that the people around you tend to think about and plan for the future is a pretty robust predictor of what you end up doing. So we tend to model the adults around us, for example. But what we can do is alter the tendency to think about the future in the moment and about domain-specific things. So you can encourage someone who, for example, a student who has a goal to perform well on a test, you can get them to explicitly think about, for example, what the benefits will be of achieving that GPA. So a common manipulation would be to ask people to imagine the best outcome of reaching their goal and then make a plan for how to get there. So I once, while I was a graduate student myself, was trying to make a little bit of extra money on the side by doing some private tutoring. And I had a student come to me who had previously failed the course that they were on, and they needed to retake it and pass it in order to get their degree. So it was really consequential that they passed this course. So what we ended up doing was, before actually delving into the content, we sat down and we essentially did a future time perspective example where we had him think about the importance of the goal, how to get there, and plans for explicitly how to be studying, and some if-then plans of how they were going to be reaching that goal because they had a busy work life. So we had to plan around some of those constraints. And we were also able to periodically check in to see, were they reaching their studying goals? Was there anything that we can do to plan around that? Was there anything I could do to maybe deliver the content slightly differently? So what we ended up doing was switching direction a couple of times when it turned out that some of the studying techniques that they had were not sufficient to reach their goal. We were able to switch up those things. And in the end, through this goal monitoring and really explicitly planning for how to get there, he actually ended up getting an A in a course that he previously failed, and said essentially that those planning and study skills, he wished he had them sooner. So I would really encourage students to be really explicit about how they plan for their time, and planning for their future in a way that helps you reach your goals is a skill that you can master over time. So if it's not coming naturally to a person at first, try to practice it a little bit more, and it'll get easier as you do it more. Have you ever thought about whether a giraffe's coffee gets cold by the time they get to drink it?
No.
Of course you don't, because you only think about yourself.